Oh, hello everybody. How you doing? Just on my way home from work and decided to clean off my windshield after being horribly assaulted by bugs this morning. And I wanted to make a video about a topic that I think, most everybody have an opinion on, and I'm not any exception to that. And it's something that is going to affect everybody at one time or another, in one way or another. That topic is immigration. And you're like, why would you talk about immigration? I said, and it's because I want to talk about immigration because I truly believe that it impacts us as motorcyclists. Motorcyclist isn't a sport that lives in, or a hobby, whatever you want to call it, that lives in isolation. It actually needs a decent economy if it's going to thrive, right? And the thing that also occurs to me is that amongst motorcyclists there is a common thread between us. Regardless of what kind of motorcycle you ride, and that is freedom. We like our freedom. We like the freedom to be able to travel. We like the freedom to be able to buy whatever bike we want. That's good enough. And I just want to say, unfettered migration affects that freedom. And I'll lay down the case for what I'm thinking here right after. Oh God, it's hot today. Right after the intro. It is so hot today. It's like 90 degrees right now. Anyway, I'll be back in a minute. Roll that intro, baby. Okay, so I think to start this little diatribe off, we're going to go back in time a little bit and kind of see how we got to where we are. By a little bit, I mean about 200 years ago. And don't worry, I'm not going to give anything exhaustive. I'm just going to kind of hopscotch my way through history and end up in our present day. I am pulling this from a specific report. And I'll have the link to that report down below in the description. Woo! Freedom! That's what it feels like. Okay, that was totally unnecessary. But it was fun. Okay, so we go back to the time to where we actually became a republic. Of course, our country was wide open, right? Aside from Native Americans, which of course everyone knows was here before us Europeans were, there wasn't anybody else here. So at that point, we literally had unfettered, completely wide open immigration. Like, come one, come all. And for that time period, that worked out splendidly, because obviously we could bring more in quicker than, birth weights could produce. And that's not something that could go on indefinitely, obviously. And by the 1920s, people realized that there needed to be a cap. And the reason why is because while immigration was great prior to that, it started to become a thing where immigrants were displacing native, natural Americans, actual citizens that were born here, started to displace them out of jobs. And we had a pretty robust immigration population, and so now it was time to put a cap on it and bring some economic stability. In the 1920s, Congress passed the first immigration restriction, and by the late 1920s, it was down to 50,000 immigrants a year. That's all that we were allowing to immigrate. How wild is that? When you look at today's numbers, 50,000 a year is nothing. And it stayed like that for nearly 40 years. And during this time, you didn't see the wage gap between the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots, that you do today. And that's measurable. That people have looked back on this and measured it, and in some cases it got narrower. But in 1965, something happened. Now, in 1940s, I back up for a second. 1940s, there was a big jump in immigration, but a lot of those were wartime refugees. And even then, they still didn't compare to the numbers that we have today. But jump in 1965. John F. Kennedy, baby. He decides he needs to remove the cap. But Congress of that time, well, that would be Republicans and Democrats, did his bidding, and they came up with the Immigration Nationality Act amendments. Now, what that did was it removed the specific head count, and Senator Kennedy, another Kennedy in power then, Senator Edward Kennedy, swore up and down that cities would not be bombarded with 1 million immigrants, that the cap was going to be 300,000, and everything was going to be hunky-dory. Yeah, well, didn't work out because of the exceptions. The exceptions were relatives of people that were already here were excluded from that amendment. In other words, they could just come over. So they brought them over, on top of the others that were allowed to come in through this act. And year after year, consistently, over 1 million refugees were hit. Immigrants were tallied. So I suppose my own opinion here, if you want to talk about the immigration being broken, the immigration system being broken, then you can blame JFK and the Democrats primarily back then in 1965 for breaking it, because it wasn't broken until then. Now, it takes a couple of years to feel the effects of this, but in 1970, you start seeing this huge disparity happen. The more people you have for a specific job segment, low income, medium income, low skill, like fast food jobs and stuff like that, the more people you have for those jobs, the less those people are going to be worth. And that's going to be reflected in income values. Massive amounts of immigration works against wages, works for more poverty for everybody, except the wealthy. The wealthy want mass immigration. They want a glut of workers because they understand that those workers per person are not worth as much, and so they can pay lower wages while reaping, bigger returns on that labor. So what has happened in the past is whenever you get this flux of illegal or legal migrants flooding a city, and they're all low to medium skilled people, the people that are there see their own chances dwindling for getting employment, for getting a pay raise, for trying to get paid what they're actually worth. So those people, they go elsewhere, right? And this is why what's happening in these sanctuary cities is important, and we need to watch it, because as they reach critical mass in their populations and their infrastructure and their economies cannot handle it anymore, people are going to exodus, and they're going to leave, and they're going to flood other places that aren't currently flooded. And that poverty, that poverty, it spreads across the nation in that way. I don't want to drag this out too much more, but I think I've made my point. But in case I haven't, let me give you some personal closing thoughts here based upon this report. Mass migration is bad. Whether it's legal, and if it's legal, and more so if it's illegal. Right now, we have literally no idea how many people have come into the country since 2021. The most conservative estimate that I can find is 8 million, and that's not counting the known getaways. You add in the known getaways, and it goes up over 10 million. And I've seen other numbers that I can't directly verify, up to 15 million. So anywhere safely between 10 and 15 million have entered this country in 3 years. And they were all incentivized to be here by the current administration, and they all get way more benefits than our own poverty-stricken people that are natural citizens. And what does all of this have to do with motorcycling? Well, it's about freedom. Freedom. And there's no written laws that are restricting freedom. There's nothing says that I can't have a Harley. There's nothing says that I can't travel, across the country to see my grandkids. There's no checkpoints, there's no law, there's no borders. But what there is an economic stranglehold, and the economics are caused by several things, not the least of which was the stupid pandemic, where people lost their ever-loving minds and gave up on common sense. But immigration and the open borders that we've had to deal with are a big, big part of that. Ever since 1965 and that Immigration Act, the wealth disparity between wealthy and poor have just gotten wider and wider and wider, and wages have stayed stagnated. Yes, there have been bumps here and there, and no, raising the minimum wage is not the answer. That's another broken piece of an economy, because raising the minimum wage only promotes more poverty. You put more people out of work, you give employers another reason to automate instead of actually have people. And you cause employers who, even if they're good, even if they have well intentions, they can't afford a stupid minimum wage that doesn't apply to their demographic area. And so then their only answer is to lay people off, put people on part-time hours so they don't have to pay for benefits to try to offset the cost. And these are not greedy mongrel employers that are just trying to suck up 800% profits for themselves. No, a lot of these are people that have put everything into their business, and they're just trying to survive like everybody else, and they have to make decisions that no one should have to make. Anyways, financial enslavement is where you lose your freedom. When you can't afford to put gas in your motorcycle, when you can't afford to buy the motorcycle that you actually want, and you got to settle for something less than. And I mean, if you even get a motorcycle is a luxury. It's not a must-have. It's a toy. Now, I try to ride my bike in such a way that it's not completely a toy. I go to work, I use it for as much things as, but in the end of the day, it's a toy. I mean, would I get in my car and just drive to some place? No. If I'm getting my car to drive, it's going to have a purpose, period. On my bike, I can get on my bike and just cruise. It doesn't matter. But if Biden gets his way and all these immigrants stay, and somehow he passes some kind of amnesty for them. And, you know, holy smokes, again, just think about it. Anywhere from 10 to 15 million people shoved into various local economies. And one look at New York, Chicago says they can't handle it. Denver now, breaks my heart to see Denver the way it's going. And it's not a realistic expectation. We are going to feel this for years to come if this is allowed to stand. And yeah, I know some of you might say Biden has put a cap on the immigrant, blah, 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 blah. It's all garbage. It's BS. It's not real. And even if it were, even if you could lie to yourself enough to say that Biden is actually doing something now after he's created this huge problem and said, I can't do anything, if he managed to get elected again, what do you really believe he won't drop that executive order and just open things up again? No. He's already said what he wanted to do.
We immediately surged to the border. All those people are seeking asylum.
An unrelenting stream of immigration. Non-stop. Non-stop. Folks like me who were Caucasian of European descent, for the first time in 2017, will be in an absolute minority in the United States of America. Absolute minority. Fewer than 50% of the people in America from then and on will be white European stock.
My complaint about all of this is, like you, I like freedom. I like freedom to travel. I like freedom to be on my bike. I like freedom, not just for me though, for my grandkids. Think about this. That many people in that short a period of time, and on an economy that was already stressed out to begin with, is overloading the system. We got a government giving them everything they could ever want, giving us nothing. You know, speaking about infrastructure, it was immigrants that helped build our infrastructure. Now it's going to be immigrants that are going to destroy our infrastructure. Why? Because the government is paying so much revenue towards them, towards their housing, towards their education, towards everything that we don't get. And do you think they're actually going to have money to fix your potholes? They're not. They're not going to have money to fix your roads, to keep up your electrical grids and all this other stuff. It's not going to happen. Basically, I want my grandkids to be free. I want my grandkids to be able to have a good job that pays them enough to where they can get a house, to where they can buy a motorcycle, and if they're really blessed, have a house with a garage that they can house that motorcycle in. And you know, like I said, so they can get a motorcycle if they want, and so they can have the financial ability to go ride, to enjoy the things that we enjoy now. The only way this gets fixed, and my grandkids, your grandkids, if you ever have any kind of financial freedom to be able to do what we're doing today, is, yeah, we got to stop voting for people that hate us. We got to stop voting for people that hate our country. We got to get rid, and I'm sorry to put it like this, but we got to mass deport all the illegals that have been blasted in here through the last 3 years. And I know there's the whole issue about Hewitt, Nancy.
For the children.
And you know what? I'm sorry. Sorry, that's the way it is. Every illegal's got to go. We have to restabilize our own economy. We have to reprioritize our natural citizens. We have to reprioritize our country. Once we get all that done, and there's a lot more than immigration to deal with that, but for today's talk, I'm just sticking with immigration. Then we can look at a sensible immigration policy like we used to have before 1965, where we say, okay, 300,000, 400,000, whatever. Pick a reasonable number, and then once those numbers are hit, end of story, done. Wait till next year. It doesn't matter if they're family seeking asylum. It doesn't matter if it's a work permit. It doesn't matter. If it's a student visa, if they have to have a green card, or if they have to have some kind of special thing to be here, they count towards that 300,000 or whatever that number would be. We have to get this under control. What we have done is not sustainable, and it will absolutely destroy us. We won't see it right now, we won't see it tomorrow, but I promise you, your kids and your grandchildren will. Because what we saw through the 80s and 90s, and we see the wealth disparity, and we see all that stuff, that all came from the 1965 bill. So, anyways, that's my thought. Y'all be good, take it easy, stay free.